Good morning. I'm Savannah Sellers. Joe has the morning off right now on Morning News Now. Winter warning. Millions of people waking up to the first major snowstorm of 2022. This morning, weather alerts are in effect from the south to the northeast, with several inches of snow expected to disrupt the morning commute. We're tracking the conditions, plus what to expect this weekend. The surge and the struggle. The U.S. trying to recover from COVID's winter wave as new cases and hospitalizations soar from coast to coast. Now, experts are warning against downplaying the symptoms of the fast-spreading Omicron variant. We'll check in with a doctor with everything you need to know to stay safe. A time to reflect. 1 year after the insurrection at the Capitol, House Speaker Nancy Pelosi looks back at the moment she was forced to leave her podium as rioters stormed the building.
The visuals of what was happening outside the Capitol, now inside the Capitol, it breaks your heart. It breaks your heart.
Her exclusive interview with our own Lester Holt on what she remembers most from that day and how she thinks it's changed the country 1 year later. Under fire, the Baltimore Police Department now facing several discrimination lawsuits filed by their own officers. What they had to say about their experience on the force as women of color and how the department is responding to claims of bias. And Elmo unhinged. Sesame Street's beloved fuzzy red Muppet going viral over a feud with a pet rock. We'll unpack the dispute that has social media calling Elmo savage. Yes, I really did just say all of that, and that is a story that we will devote some airtime to a little bit later because it's Friday, and happy Friday. And if you're waking up in the Northeast, you might want to take a look out your window. It has snowed quite a bit overnight, as you may already know. Snow's piling up from Maryland to Massachusetts, and a state of emergency has been declared in several states along the East Coast as people head out the door for their morning commute. The storm already created major travel disruption in the Tennessee Valley yesterday, where some areas saw snowfall totals topping 8 inches. More than 60 million people are under winter weather alerts this morning as the snow could get as high as a foot in some areas. We've got team coverage this morning. We'll, of course, check in with our Bill Cairns. But we're going to start with Juliana Valencia, who's live on the ground in Washington, D.C. for us this morning to tell us what she's seeing there. Juliana, good morning. So what is the situation like on the ground? I see some snow piled up behind you. You look pretty warm. You're dressed right for sure, but tell us what you're seeing.
Definitely dressed right, and good morning, Savannah. Good to be with you. We are in Northwest Washington, about 20 minutes from the National Mall, and I'll tell you, this was a quick-moving storm. About 3:30 this morning, though, it was a consistent downfall of light, fluffy snow. It was just coming down the streets of Washington. We're quiet, and it was just this beautiful blanket of snow. But now, for the morning commuters, it is a slushy mess. I mean, they pre-treated the roads overnight, so those look much better. The side roads are what people are going to have to worry about. But, you know, for your Friday, the first week of the year, people are just going to have to bundle up and bear with it, Savannah.
Thank you so much, Juliana, for the latest in Washington, D.C. I'll come back to you in just a moment. But now we're also going to check in with Jen Maxfield. She's live on the ground in New Jersey. I think we've got her. Jen, good morning. So we know the tri-state area is getting the worst of this right now. I can attest to that from my morning commute. Just a few hours ago, it was a little slippery on the roads out there. What's it looking like there in New Jersey?
Well, look, we've been here in Hazlet, New Jersey. This is right near the Jersey Shore. We've been here since about 3 in the morning. The snow's been falling steadily. In fact, what you're seeing right now is more like a break in the action because we were in a really heavy band of snow just about an hour ago. But take a look down here. This is a retaining wall. We've been showing this to our viewers all morning. It's completely covered in snow right now. We just measured it a few minutes ago. That is a 5-inch accumulation and still coming down. We're here at a Wawa, New Jersey's favorite convenience store, where people are coming to get hot coffee this morning. The Wawa's right off Route 36 North here. You can see the drivers taking it easy, but the traffic is moving on Route 36. In some cases, only one lane open. It's really a race between the plow truck drivers and the snowflakes, which are still falling steadily here, Savannah.
All right. And Juliana, tell us, what are the road conditions like? I know in the tri-state area, as I just mentioned, my own experience getting in this morning, it was a little crazy on the road out there. It looks like actually in New Jersey, they might be worse just from what I can see over both your shoulders. But Juliana, what are you seeing?
I would agree with you, Savannah. So it's much different than the snowstorm we had on Monday, because on Monday, since it started with rain, they couldn't pre-treat the roads. But today, since the temperatures were colder and there was no rain, in this area, they were able to pre-treat the roads, and those main roads like the one behind me you see here, it is basically clear. It's those side roads that were pre-treated that people have to worry about. Washington got about 3 inches this morning. Again, it was more of that light, fluffy snow. So if the kiddos, they want to go out and maybe sled today, they got to do it in the next couple of hours, because this snow is not going to stick around. It's going to turn into more of that wet mess in maybe just a couple of hours, Savannah.
Oh, that'll be lovely. Hey, Jen, quickly, just tell me, how are the roads there where you are? How is it going to be for people on their morning commute in the tri-state area?
Definitely a challenge, because, look, it's not just the matter of racing against the snowflakes. It's also a matter of staffing. So many of these Department of Public Works right now have staffing challenges with people out due to COVID infections or COVID exposure. So that's an issue as well. We did speak with some snowplow operators this morning who tell us they've been up all night. They've been clearing the roads. The roads were brined in order to prep them, to get them not so slippery. There were major issues here in New Jersey earlier this week. On Wednesday, we had a layer of ice during the morning commute, and certainly nobody wants a repeat of that situation where we saw so many accidents. But again, we are on a state highway here, Route 36, a road that a lot of people here in the shore towns travel to go north, to go to work in New York City or points north. And we can see the traffic is moving well there this morning. We know the road crews are working as fast as they can to get the roads clear in New Jersey for people who do have to go to work this morning, like we do, Savannah.
Yeah, exactly. Like we already did, actually, but for a lot of people. All right. Thank you both for being up in the cold, out there in the cold and up early with us. Good to see you both. Thanks so much. Now let's go to Bill Cairns, of course, to talk about what's going to happen over the next few hours in the Northeast, where this is headed next, how bad it could get. I'm hearing maybe even up to 10 inches in the city. Is that right, Bill?
That's pushing it. I don't think we'll get there. Maybe 5 or 6 in a few spots.
Okay.
But Savannah, just to the north of New York City, it's been eye-opening, impressive. This storm has been very, very efficient at producing snowflakes that accumulate quickly. It's called like a powdery snow or a fluffy snow. And we talk about snow ratios. Typically, like 1 inch of rain would equal like a foot of snow. This is going to be like 20 inches of snow to like 1 inch of liquid rain. So we call that the rain to snow ratio or liquid to snow ratio. And with this storm, it's extremely fluffy. It's like Alaska-like. Even yesterday in Nashville, Tennessee, we had 6 inches of snow. In Lexington, Kentucky, we had 10 inches of snow. So these totals were like, I mean, in Nashville, it was the biggest snowstorm that they had in 3 years. You have to go back to 2018. And in Lexington, Kentucky, 10 inches of snow does not happen that often. And that's why traffic was just at a standstill and blocked, like you see there. It wasn't an overnight situation like they had in Virginia earlier this week, but for a couple hours, traffic was at a standstill on a lot of the major highways through the state. And overnight in even West Virginia, we picked up 13 inches of snow in snowshoes. So let's get to what we're dealing with right now. If you're heading out the door, the snow is over in D.C. It is ending in Philadelphia, but in southern New England, it is difficult. I just heard about a tractor trailer on I-84 that tipped over. The highway is blocked in one direction. And the roads in I-95, New Haven's had up to 10 inches of snow overnight. Long Island is still snowing pretty hard. So as expected, the worst of the morning commute is southern New England. Philadelphia, the snow looks like it just ended for you. In New York City, you'll have to wait like another hour. So Philadelphia, your snow is over with. New York, maybe another inch. Hartford, 1 or 2. But the heavy snow will still come down this morning from Providence to Boston northwards. So in Philadelphia, snow ending right now. Storm total around 3 to 5. The snow will be ending in New York City as we go throughout the next hour or two. Storm totals 4 to 6. The bigger totals, Savannah, definitely in Connecticut. As I mentioned, in areas of southern Connecticut and eastern Connecticut, I've already heard reports of up to a foot of fluffy snow. Savannah, this isn't the type of snow I'll complain about shoveling. I'm even tempted to use the leaf blower in this snow because it will just...
Okay, I didn't grow up in snow, so I didn't even know that was a thing that people did. I was going to ask you, though, Bill, Are you ready to begin your complaints about shoveling? Not yet, it sounds like.
No, I think my kid's school was canceled, and my son is already asking me how much I'm going to pay him to shovel our driveway. We're in negotiations.
Hey, you don't like to do it? Give him a job. Maybe it works out. Also, that used to make me so jealous growing up in San Diego. Snow days from school. I was like, what? All right, Bill, thanks so much. We'll check in with you in a bit. All right, now we'll continue our coverage of that storm this morning, of course, but we turn now to a startling milestone in the COVID pandemic. Global cases surpassed 300 million as the Omicron variant continues to sweep across borders. And while Omicron's driving cases to unprecedented levels, experts do say there's hope because death rates with this variant have remained relatively low, unlike with the previously dominant Delta strain. But health officials are still urging everyone to get their booster shots. The CDC issued new recommendations saying the COVID vaccine series is not complete without that additional dose. The decision comes as data continues to suggest the initial vaccine doses are less effective against the Omicron variant. Let's now bring in our friend, someone you'll recognize, NBC News medical contributor, Dr. Kavita Patel, for more on all this. Dr. Patel, great to see you. Good morning. So I want to start right there with what I just said about vaccines, because I think some people might think, wait a minute, what did she just say? And what's the latest with dosing? And what makes me fully vaccinated? So let's just start there. What is this new guideline and what does it mean? Because there was this important distinction before between your first 2 doses of an mRNA vaccine, so Pfizer or Moderna. That second dose wasn't a booster. It was just part of your vaccine. Is that what's now happening with that 3rd dose? And then in a minute, we'll get to what's going on with J&J.
Yeah, that's really just to make it a little more simple, and it's hard with sometimes with some of this language. You're absolutely right. Those original doses, that's what kind of constitutes the definition, somewhat legal almost, of fully vaccinated. That's why you're hearing that term used a lot. But to really be up to date with your vaccines, which is really what we care about as people to prevent disease, you really do need that 3rd shot, that booster dose, as we're calling it. That's for the mRNA. For Johnson & Johnson, I know, Savannah, we've talked about this. It's a little different because 2 shots of Johnson & Johnson is still what you really need to be considered fully vaccinated, which leaves a lingering question for Johnson & Johnson recipients that I think everyone should ask. Do I need a 3rd shot of something? So far, the data is mixed, but I've even been recommending that patients ask to see if they need a 3rd shot, especially with Omicron.
You know what that sounds like to me, Dr. Patel? That sounds like a phone call between you and I a little bit later as a J&J recipient initially. So, okay, so then what does this mean, though, for people who are thinking, hey, I'm fully vaccinated, but maybe they haven't been boosted yet? So, for example, there are certain places with these vaccine mandates in place. Here in New York City, I can't go into a restaurant without showing a card that on mine had just had 1 dose of J&J and then has my booster on it. Right. But, you know, that says you're fully vaccinated. Is fully vaccinated now 3 doses? Are you not going to go into a restaurant without having that, what was a booster, which is now just part of the vaccine?
No, and that's why I think it's important to kind of parse out that fully vaccinated for the purposes of cards, transport, travel, even international and domestic travel where you need it, is really still that original series. I really do think of it as more of a legal definition. Think of it in a similar way of kind of the bare minimum, but then to be, quote, up to date, especially with the most protection, that's what really includes those 3rd doses. And we've already got countries like Israel that are offering 4th doses. So this is not a question of these vaccines are not working. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, when will it end? This is really a question of what do we need to do to protect against disease? Omicron has really challenged all of that, but vaccines are still protecting against disease. These breakthrough infections, if you're boosted, these breakthrough infections look like a sore throat. If you've just had this original series, you look a little sicker. If you've been unvaccinated, you're likely going to end up in the hospital if you don't have the protection.
All right. Great information there. It's so confusing, I think, for a lot of people, especially as people just hear, OK, I need another shot. I need another shot. This is such good information to help people kind of understand why and exactly what's happening here. Dr. Patel, as always, thank you so much. Great to see you.
Take care.
Now let's talk through vaccine mandates, because that fight is actually headed to the nation's highest court. The Supreme Court will hear arguments over President Biden's vaccine mandates for certain businesses and medical facilities. Those policies affect nearly 100 million workers. NBC News national security correspondent Ken Delanian is following today's arguments for us. Ken, good morning. So the Supreme Court's actually going to review 2 challenges to President Biden's vaccine policies. So first, just walk us through who's challenging these policies, why, and what does it mean we're actually going to see today?
Yeah, good morning, Savannah. One case is against the Occupational Health and Safety Administration, OSHA, and that's the bigger of these 2 cases because that's a sweeping rule that's imposed on every business with more than 100 employees, requiring every employee to be vaccinated, and if they don't, they have to have weekly testing. That's opposed by a number of small business groups. And then there's another rule imposing a vaccine mandate on healthcare workers, 22 million healthcare workers. And, you know, Savannah, sometimes the Supreme Court is deciding on the constitutionality of laws before them. In this case, it's really about the statute. It's really a question of whether the federal government has the authority to impose these rules. The lower courts have been mixed on this. Now we're going to go to the Supreme Court. And by the way, Savannah, we're going to go to a Supreme Court that is closed for the safety of its employees to the public because of COVID. And every justice is vaccinated and boosted.
Well, there you have it, especially as we talk about something like this. Now, Ken, have lower courts responded to these challenges at all before? Have we had any type of indication what's happened there?
Yes, and it's been mixed. So on the bigger OSHA mandate, one circuit, the Fifth Circuit in New Orleans, put a stay on that and blocked it and said it was not appropriate. And then another appeals court said that it was okay. And so that's why it's before the Supremes. They have to decide here. And, you know, this is a classic clash of interests here because we have a very big public health interest, right, in getting everyone vaccinated. But what these small businesses say is that, look, if I impose this mandate, I'm going to lose 20 to 30% of my employees. We already have a labor shortage and a supply chain shortage, so it could cause a lot of disruption. And Amtrak, for example, which is under a different mandate, had to suspend their vaccine mandate because they were going to have to do service cuts if they didn't, Savannah.
Wow, so much going on with this vaccine and these mandates. And Ken, quickly, when can we expect a decision here from the Supreme Court?
Probably towards the end of the term in a few months, Savannah.
All right, awesome. Ken, as always, great to see you. Thank you so much.
You bet.
Now on Capitol Hill, the past 24 hours have been filled with vigils, tributes, and remembrance of the insurrection last year on January 6th. Last night on the Capitol steps, members of Congress held a candlelight vigil to mark the one-year anniversary of the Capitol Hill riot. NBC Nightly News anchor Lester Holt sat down with House Speaker Nancy Pelosi as she looked back on that day.
Prehaps no one had a clearer view of the stakes that day than House Speaker Nancy Pelosi. I spoke with her at the Capitol. President Biden was here in the Capitol, delivered a blistering takedown of his predecessor, and also offered a vigorous defense of democracy. Given the environment we're in right now, where there are people still trying to delegitimize the investigation, diminish the extent of what happened here, do you wish that speech had come sooner?
It's what our country needed right now. And I'm very proud of the president's speech. It was forceful, truthful, and a wake-up call to some in our country of how close we came to catastrophe for our democracy that day in a way that was unprecedented.
The way he went after Donald Trump, however, do you think that fuels the conversation among many Republicans that there's something political about the observances? Mitch McConnell suggested that it's being used for political gain.
Well, that's for him to say. The fact is, there was an assault on our democracy instigated by the then President of the United States, an incitement of an insurrection on the Capitol, and that's just something that Mitch McConnell or anybody else cannot whitewash.
I want you to take me into that day, if you will. We all remember you being quickly escorted off the podium. I've heard you talk about it before. You didn't want to go.
No.
Do you think now, though, knowing what you know, do you think about what would have happened had you stayed?
Well, the security was very definite. And when they pulled me down from the podium, I said, don't worry about it. They said, no, you must go. You must go. And so you don't even have a conversation. You want to do your job, they have to do their job. The visuals of what was happening outside the Capitol, now inside the Capitol, it breaks your heart. It breaks your heart. It's as if somebody in the White House dropped a bomb on the Congress of the United States.
There were people in this Capitol that day who were viewing you as an enemy, to be captured, to be humiliated. One of them said, was looking for you to shoot her in her frigging brain.
Yeah.
They desecrated your office. They left your staffers, fearing for their lives. Yeah. Have you found a way to put that in perspective, to reconcile it a year later?
Well, I've been one of their targets for a long time, and I have security to protect me. My concern was really for the other members and for the staff. They can destroy things in the Speaker's office. That's wrong, but, you know, that can be repaired. But the trauma that they foisted on the idealistic people who come to the Capitol to work, the institutional staffers, have nothing to do with Democrats and Republicans, only the Congress, those who had to clean up behind these people with their defecation of words and poo on the floor of the Capitol while they were recalled names that are totally unacceptable.
Speaker Pelosi taking me through the Capitol, showing me where her staff was hiding.
The rioters, they banged down one of the doors. The staff was in there under the table in the dark. They couldn't speak for like almost 3 hours.
And they're obviously hearing everything because it's taking place right here.
Yeah, where is she? Would come to get her and all that stuff. And maybe they thought I was in there. I don't know.
Then we go inside her office. Where
you saw them sitting at the desk and taking the mail and all that was here. You know, that's where that thug was sitting. In the desk.
What did you think when you saw that picture?
Well, it was a manifestation of Donald Trump. Complete disrespect.
I asked her about the lasting impact. What has been lost that you fear can't be regained?
I think everything be regained. America is an optimistic country. The resilience of our democracy can withstand even the former president of the United States.
And I asked about the House committee investigating January 6th. It's composed of virtually all Democrats, Republicans pulling out after Pelosi rejected 2 of their selections. So she picked 2 Republicans, both fierce critics of former President Trump. Many Republicans will say that the process was not fair, that there were Republicans who were rejected as potential members of the committee.
They were not. Well, the Speaker has the right to make the appointments.
But there are individuals they wanted on that committee who
And we said
rejected.
that most of them could come. 2 we could not because they were suspect in terms of their involvement in January 6th. They can whine all they want, but they walked away from the opportunity to having their full complement of members on the committee. Now I ask all members to rise for a moment of silence.
You've been very vocal in the past about praying for your adversaries.
I always do, and I always pray for them that they will open their hearts to God's blessings to do what is right. But I say to the Republicans, take back your party. This is not who you are. You're the grand old party. It's done so much for America, had great leadership for our country. This is a sad thing for the country that the Republican Party would have melted down to a cult.
Our thanks to Lester Holt for that exclusive interview. Coming up after the break, unrest in Kazakhstan. The country's president now telling troops shoot to kill as anti-government protests grow more violent. The new developments next on Morning News Now. Welcome back, and let's go overseas now to the deadly unrest in Kazakhstan. This morning, the president says he has ordered security forces to, quote, fire without warning, blaming foreign-trained terrorists on the anti-government protests that have rocked the country. He did not provide evidence for that claim. Earlier, the president said constitutional order had been, quote, mainly restored following days of violence that left dozens dead and thousands detained. Russian troops arrived in the country yesterday at the president's request to help quell the unrest. NBC News foreign correspondent Matt Bradley has more on the day's events.
Bloodshed on the streets of Kazakhstan as protests take a deadly turn. Shots ringing out across the city of Almaty. Security forces say they, quote, eliminated dozens of demonstrators, leaving more than 1,000 injured after swarms of armed protesters sieged government buildings and set them on fire. At least 12 officers were killed, another 350 hurt, 2 of them beheaded, according to police. Authorities releasing this surveillance footage showing a car plowing through a line of officers responding to the protests. President Kassym-Jomart Tokayev's residence in Almaty desolate and charred. A day after armed protesters broke in, their burnt-out trucks lodged in security checkpoints. Russia and its allies sending armored vehicles and soldiers to the region. The unprecedented show of force marks the first time the Collective Security Treaty Organization, or CSTO, the Russian equivalent of NATO, has deployed troops to aid one of its member nations.
This will be a big test for the CSTO, which has, in previous instances in Kyrgyzstan and in Armenia, not wanted to take on much of a role, but also a big test for Russia, whether it has the capability to stabilize the situation in a country that is quite important for its own security.
The protests in Kazakhstan, which were sparked by anger over a surge in fuel prices, have since exploded into nationwide demonstrations. People angry over economic inequality and government corruption pouring into the streets for 5 straight days. The president conceded to demands to reinstitute price caps on fuel and replace his entire cabinet, but all that has done little to quiet the movement. The UN calling for restraint on all sides.
People have a right to express their grievances. It needs to be done peacefully, and security forces need to protect that right.
The unrest in Kazakhstan, one of the most economically and politically stable former Soviet states, now threaten to destabilize a region already reeling from similar democratic uprisings in Ukraine and Belarus, but with Russian troops on the ground and protesters not satisfied with the government's response, a peaceful end to the conflict is nowhere in sight. Matt Bradley, NBC News.
And coming up, new developments in 2 high-profile trials in Georgia. Sentencing day for the 3 men who killed Ahmaud Arbery. We'll break down the charges that could put them in prison for life. And in New York, calls for a mistrial in the Ghislaine Maxwell sex trafficking case over new revelations made by 2 jurors. We'll explain both of those up next on Morning News Now. Welcome back to The Good Talker, and this is a cool one. South Korean actress Ho Yeon-jung has been dominating the entertainment industry ever since her breakout role in the hit Netflix series Squid Game. Get this, her latest achievement, becoming the first ever Korean to appear solo on the cover of American Vogue. After playing a North Korean defector on Squid Game, Ho Young has become the most followed Korean actress on Instagram, racking up more than 23 million followers. Jung started her modeling career at an early age, appearing on Korea's Next Top Model at 19. She later worked with brands like Chanel and Louis Vuitton, and in her cover interview for Vogue's February issue, Jung said she is looking forward to new levels of success. And this is kind of fun, one of which is she hopes to, quote, play a character that dyes her hair purple. I love her, and I love that show. Not sure what that says about me, but that I liked the show since it's so intense, but it was a good one. That's very cool to hear. Now, the 3 men convicted of killing Ahmaud Arbery will be sentenced today in a Georgia courtroom. Travis McMichael, his father, Gregory McMichael, and William Roddy Bryan all face mandatory life sentences. Back in November, the 3 men were convicted of killing 25-year-old Ahmaud Arbery. In February 2020, Arbery was out for a jog in Brunswick, Georgia, when the 3 men chased him, later killing him. NBC News correspondent Katie Beck has been following this case and joins us now from Brunswick, Georgia. Hi, Katie. Good morning. So now we know the 3 men face life sentences. So let's talk through what we're watching for in a sentencing hearing today. Are lighter sentences possible, or is this about the possibility of parole?
Well, Georgia statutes are pretty tough on that, Savannah, and they are basically all facing a mandatory life sentence. They were all convicted of murder. What will be decided today is, will they be eligible at some point for parole? And even that, under Georgia state law, comes after serving 30 years. So at this point, a lighter sentence really isn't in the mix. What's on the table is whether or not at some point in that sentence they'll be able to be eligible for parole.
And now, Katie, we know that today Arbery's mother will speak at the hearing. What can we expect to hear from her, and who else will we hear from?
Well, we are told we are going to hear from Arbery's mother, also his father, and possibly a third witness on his side. In terms of the defendants, we are not completely sure who will be testifying on their behalf. They will also have a chance to speak to the judge directly as defendants before they are sentenced. So at this point, we know there will be some testimony. We don't expect this to be an extremely long hearing today. The judge who has presided over this case from the beginning will be listening to all of this testimony today, and he will be the ultimate decider of whether or not these defendants are eligible for parole.
And now, while today might be quick, there is more to watch for here in this case. The McMichaels and William Bryan will be in a federal courtroom next month facing hate crime charges. What do we know about that case?
Sure. Yeah, you would think this would be the final chapter for these three defendants, but there's a whole other chapter to this story that has yet to unfold, and that is that hate crimes federal lawsuit that is going to be taking place just about a month from now. All three defendants are charged in that case, and that case really has a different focus than the criminal trial. At the criminal trial, the racial motivations were largely absent from the conversation. That will not be the case in the federal trial. They will focus on social media exchanges, things that the defendants posted of a racial nature, and they will be talking about how Ahmaud Arbery's civil liberties were violated that day because of his race. So that will be a different topic taking center stage. Same three defendants, and of course, again, facing life.
So a lot more to watch for here. Katie Beck, thank you so much. Now, the lawyers for Ghislaine Maxwell are calling for a new trial after two jurors revealed they were sexually abused as children. One of those jurors told Reuters he talked about his experience with other jurors during deliberations. And according to the New York Times, a second anonymous juror said they did the same. Maxwell was convicted of multiple sex trafficking and conspiracy charges in a federal courtroom just last week. Let's bring in NBC News legal analyst Danny Savalos. Danny, good morning. Always great to have you to walk us through these things. I got a lot of questions here, but let's start with kind of some of the updates. Federal prosecutors are now requesting a hearing with one of these jurors, one of the two I just mentioned. What kind of information are they looking to get from them, and what happens next?
First, they're going to do something very simple. They're going to look at the juror questionnaire and see what it says. What was the question that they allegedly failed to answer accurately, or at worst, failed to answer honestly? Then the court's going to want to know, to what degree was this inadvertent? Was it in good faith? Or did the juror dishonestly answer the question? And that last word is the magic word. It's the key to the test in this jurisdiction, the Southern District of New York. There's a two-pronged test. First, the defense would have to show that the juror answered dishonestly. And second, even if the juror answered dishonestly, the defense has to show that had everybody known the truth, this juror would have been excused for cause based on that juror's bias.
Okay, so Danny, I'm happy you brought that up, because the first thing I thought of when I first heard this was, how did this happen? Because the juror selection process is intense, and it includes these questionnaires that try to account for things like this and try to make sure that they don't happen. So this juror told Reuters he, quote, flew through those questions. And now we know it included a question that said, quote, have you or a friend or family member ever been the victim of sexual harassment, sexual abuse, or sexual assault? Now, that juror told Reuters that he didn't recall that question on that form or being asked about it during follow-up questioning. So what do you make of this as somebody who's, been in a courtroom many times before? I mean, does it seem possible that he doesn't remember it? What would your questions be here? And what kind of trouble could he be in?
This is going to lead inexorably to one of my favorite moments in the law. It's a recurring moment where someone has to testify or admit that they sign or fill out forms without reading the question. And the reality is we all do it sometimes, me too, especially when I'm clicking. But at some point, this juror is going to have to say, yes, I looked at this. Yes, that's my handwriting. Yes, that's my signature. And no, I didn't read it before I filled it out. So the judge in this case is going to have to determine whether that was a dishonest answer. And even then, it's still a long shot. Savannah, I can count the number of times this challenge has succeeded that I know of on one hand, and I could probably still do it if that hand had one finger. That's how rare this challenge will be.
Wow. I can't remember what it was for now, but just yesterday I checked something online. I accept the terms and conditions, I'm sorry to say, but this seems like one of those times where you don't do that. You got to actually read them. Okay, Danny, let's not talk about what this could mean. I mean, this is obviously a hugely high-profile case. Ghislaine Maxwell, the relation to Jeffrey Epstein here. We thought that, we sort of had a decision here in the answers. Could this juror's interviews, could this juror not reading that question, could this juror discussing this mean we see a whole new trial here? I mean, does that give Maxwell's team enough ammunition that what we think right now is the verdict in this case may change if we have to do this all over again?
In theory, it could, but statistically, it is a long shot. The law puts the thumb on the scale heavily against the defendant in situations like this, because as the Supreme Court has recognized, we want finality in jury verdicts. And look, admittedly, I'm a defense attorney. I'll do whatever I can to try and challenge a verdict against my client. So, the defense team has their duty to challenge this. But statistically, it's just not likely to succeed because, at least according to the test in this jurisdiction, it can't be an accidental answer. It can't be oh, I misunderstood the question. It's got to be, number one, that the juror was concealing something intentionally, and they were concealing something that would have been directly relevant to this case. At least at first glance, some of those elements appear to be present, but it's still an uphill climb.
All right, Danny Savalos, some fascinating stuff there. Thank you so much. And we know you will keep an eye on that. Good to see you. Now, coming up, the discrimination claims in city police departments. We're going to hear from officers in Baltimore.
I felt like I had no other choice but to be forced to resign, or I was going to be disciplined for, no reason.
When we return here on Morning News Now, details on the lawsuits filed against the department, plus what police are saying now about the claims after the break. Welcome back. Female police officers in several major cities are now filing lawsuits against their own departments, alleging gender-based and racial discrimination. That includes 4 sergeants in Baltimore. And NBC News Now correspondent Dasha Burns spoke with those women, and she joins us now with their story. Hi, Dasha. Good morning.
Hey, Savannah, good morning. Police departments all across the country have been under the spotlight amid the George Floyd protests, the defund the police movement, and questions around the tactics police use in the communities where they work. But the allegations of misconduct don't stop there. I spoke with 4 female sergeants in the Baltimore Police Department who say they faced racial and gender-based discrimination. And their stories, Savannah, are hard to hear, but the experts and lawyers we spoke with say they're not unique. What is unique is that they spoke out. Watch.
You first come on, you thinking, these people are going to do the right thing. They have the highest integrity. They're a police officer. Then when you get inside, it's totally different.
Danica Jean-Pierre is a mother of 3 with 1 on the way, and one of 4 women suing the city of Baltimore and the Baltimore PD for discrimination within the department.
If you had to choose one word to describe the environment at your workplace, how would you describe it?
Toxic.
Hostile.
Dysfunctional. Scary.
These sergeants served for more than a decade. All but 1 are still on the force.
I felt like I had no other choice but to be forced to resign, or I was going to be disciplined for, no reason.
The 4 lawsuits each allege racial and gender discrimination. 2 lawsuits also allege pregnancy discrimination, and 2 allege disability discrimination.
There was a white male sergeant. He would ask me, could I be his first black girl, because he's never been with a black girl before. Once he kind of got the hint that I'm like, no, I started getting toy racks placed on my desk.
After Jasmine Rowlett reported the alleged sexual harassment, she claims she faced harsh retaliation. The department denied most of Rowlett's allegations in response to her complaint.
I'm wondering, is there going to be an accidental discharge when somebody's cleaning their weapon? Because
it's gone that far where that's a fear you have.
These people are dangerous.
All of the women reported their claims through official channels, but they say things only got worse afterward.
I came forward with the information that this commander called an applicant an expletive N-word. I was involuntarily transferred. I was marginalized, ostracized in every way you can think about.
Danica was nearing the end of her pregnancy when she says the retaliation reached a fever pitch and the stress induced a premature birth.
I ended up having my baby on the sidewalk in 30-degree weather with no professional help, none.
A spokesperson for the Baltimore police tells NBC News the department is not permitted to comment on pending litigation. And it's not just Baltimore. Women in major police departments across the country are suing on allegations of gender discrimination, often accompanied by racial discrimination.
Nobody really knows the strength that it takes to do this, to hold an agency like this accountable for their actions.
Some people might hear this story and say, Why not just quit?
The problem with this is this issue is nationwide.
We all love our job as being police officers, but it's not the people who we are protecting outside in the city that we're scared of. We're scared of the people inside.
And Savannah, as I was asking legal experts and lawyers, why now? Why is this the moment where officers all across the country are coming out and speaking out about this? And the lawyer for these 4 women actually told me that, we had the defund the police movement, and then we also had the Me Too movement. And she thinks this is sort of the culmination of those two, creating the conditions, creating a space for these women to speak out. I'll tell you, though, in talking to these women, it is not easy to be speaking about this, to come forward, to talk about this on camera, but they believe that this is one step toward having some sort of accountability, Savannah.
Absolutely. Incredible interviews there, Dasha, that revealed quite a bit. Thank you so much. Good to see you. Now, as last year's riot at the Capitol was unfolding, people on the internet were able to quickly begin identifying rioters and share information about them. That's a practice called doxing. NBC News correspondent Tremaine Lee introduces us to the man who has used this method for many years, actually, to expose white supremacists and fight right-wing extremists.
As the Capitol riot unfolded on national TV, online sleuths took to their keyboards, immediately exposing the identities of rioters and sharing personal details about them in real time. Many of those exposed, as having been at the Capitol that day, lost jobs, friends, even family ties, and hundreds were arrested. While we've learned that many in the crowd were not associated with far-right extremist groups, the practice of doxing and outing people online can be traced to one man who has used it for 2 decades to get under the skin of white supremacists, fascists, and groups associated with those ideologies. His name is Darryl Lamont Jenkins. He's the founder of One People's Project and a man that Wired magazine has referred to as the anti-fascist doxing guru.
I was very happy to see that there was a bunch of people that decided that we are going to find out who they are, and we're going to let the world know who they are. And it produced some positive results.
Do you ever seriously fear for your life? Is there concern that you might, get hurt doing this work?
You have to be. You always are concerned. You have to be prepared for that because they tell you that they're trying to kill you. They tell you that they want to hurt you. So I said, okay, but I'm still doing the work. I'll just be prepared for when you come.
On January 6, 2020, Jenkins was not at the Capitol. He didn't get an in-person view of the crowd, so he had to rely on photos and videos posted by the rioters themselves to figure out who joined the insurrection. If he had been there, he believes he could have been more helpful in assessing who was who that day.
I still kick myself because remember, a lot of the footage, a lot of the sounds and things that we have today comes from that side. And that side was doing a heck of a lot to try to scrub their appearances.
A year later, the work of understanding how the insurrection happened, who the rioters were, and where they came from continues. Professor Robert Pape has analyzed the identities of the more than 700 people arrested after the riot. He says 87% of the rioters he's analyzed so far say they are not members of groups like the Proud Boys or Oath Keepers.
What we're seeing is over and over in our studies that this is part of the mainstream, not just fringe groups.
And the FBI continues to hunt them down, combing through thousands of hours of video and photos, cell phone records, facial recognition technology, and tips from internet detectives like Jenkins.
In order for us to defeat the hate mongering that goes on in the country today, we are going to have to understand who they are and what they were about and where they are and how they operate. You can't do that without doxing.
All right, our thanks to Tremaine Lee for that report. And now it's time for our CNBC Money Minute, the biggest financial headlines of the day and why they matter too. Dominic Chu is with us again today. Hey, Dom, good morning.
TGIF, Savannah. Let's start with Twitter because it's testing a new feature called Tweet Takes, which allows users to share reaction videos alongside a quote tweet. So you can choose to send a quote tweet with a reaction instead of just a typical retweet. These takes can be either a photo or a video, and the original post will be embedded as a card overlap. Now, it's similar to TikTok's reaction videos, which often have a comment or another user's clip as a source, so keep an eye on that feature for Twitter. SpaceX continues to expand its Starlink internet service. The company, run by Twitter CEO, or rather Tesla CEO Elon Musk, is launching more satellites into orbit these days. SpaceX says it has more than 145,000 users in 25 countries. Starlink aims to provide high-speed internet anywhere on the planet through an interconnected network or constellation worth of satellites. And Fresca is the latest soft drink to go hard. Coca-Cola, which owns the brand, is teaming up with Corona maker Constellation Brands for a new alcoholic version called Fresca Mixed. It will be launched in the U.S. later on this year. Those so-called adult alternative beverages like ready-to-drink cocktails are, by the way, a nearly $8 billion business. So, Savannah, I don't know how into things like hard seltzers you are. I'm not as into them, but I guess I'd be willing to try just to see what they would be like.
Yeah, I don't get it either, and people are obsessed with them, and I just don't think they taste good. And have you seen the SNL sketch about them? Because if not, you must. That's how I feel about it. It's like every time you turn around, here we go. Somebody else has a seltzer. Also,
by the way, Savannah, I would say this. I'm old enough to remember real Fresca, so I kind of want to try just to see if it's real Fresca.
Yeah, no, that makes sense. And Dom, let me tell you, thank you. This is our first CNBC Money Minute in 3 days that hasn't left me daydreaming about something fried or cheesy before 9 a.m. So we can talk about hard Fresca all day long. Yeah. Yeah, I guess it's dry January, too. So you guys just love to tempt me. All right, thanks, Dom.
You got it.
Now, coming up, if you've seen spam risk on your caller ID, you're not alone. Up next on this week's Good to Know, details on millions of robocall complaints made to the FTC, plus the new strategy that scammers are using to get you to pick up the phone. And Elmo angry, drama on Sesame Street after the lovable Muppet goes off on a pet rock. We'll explain next on Morning News Now. All right, in case you forgot, some good news. It's Friday, and that means it's time, as you just saw, for Good to Know. Today, we've got a drone saving a life, TikTok going beyond your phone, and Alexa heading to space. Here's NBC's senior consumer investigative correspondent, Vicki Nguyen.
Hey, good morning. Raise your hand if you got a lot of spam phone calls last year. Yeah, we're not alone. Robocall complaints to federal regulators jumped by 25% in 2021, according to FTC data published this week. Americans reported more than 5 million complaints over unwanted telemarketing and robocalls. Scammers can conceal their identity by spoofing. They allow the call to look like it's coming from a trusted source or a local number, fooling you into picking it up. Spam calls related to warranty protection and imposters were the most commonly reported topics. Get ready for TikTok on the big screen. Streaming startup Atmosphere has integrated the best of TikTok to its TV package for over 19,000 businesses globally. Expect to see some viral trends at your favorite restaurants, hotels, and bars, including Taco Bell, Westin, and Texas Roadhouse. Alexa, can you fly me to the moon? Amazon and aerospace company Lockheed Martin are sending Alexa to space. Yeah, NASA's Artemis 1 mission is slated to take off this March with the eventual goal of landing the first woman and first person of color on the moon. The space cabin will have an interactive tablet with a reconfigured version of Amazon's voice assistant, Alexa. I wonder if you can hear us from Earth, too. For the first time in medical history, a drone has saved a life, according to Everdrone. A 71-year-old man in Sweden had a heart attack while shoveling snow in his driveway. Emergency dispatchers were able to send in a defibrillator using a drone. A bystander who was a doctor gave the man CPR and used the device to help until the ambulance arrived. Everdrone says it aims to deliver help in under 10 minutes. In this case, that defibrillator arrived in just 3 minutes. For News Now, I'm Vicki Nguyen, and that's Good to Know.
Vicki, thank you so much. Also, I think we just got some new music for Good to Know. That was kind of fun. All right, now there's a major internet feud going on, and it's coming from an unexpected source, Elmo. Now, when you think Elmo, you might think cuddly or cute. But what about, I can barely even say it, what about savage. Yes, that's the word being thrown around over his feud with, here's where it gets even weirder, a pet rock. It all stems from a clip from a 2004 episode of Sesame Street that's having its viral moment right now.
Elmo, just take this one. No, wait, Elmo. What? Rocco says that he wants the oatmeal raisin cookie. Rocco? Rocco's a rock, Zoe. Rocco won't know the difference. How is Rocco going to eat that cookie, Zoe? Tell Elmo. Rocco doesn't even have a mouth.
Okay, NBC News. I can't even introduce you. I don't know why. This is truly killing me. Youth and internet culture reporter Colin Rosenblatt is here. And viewers at home, yes, we are about to spend a few minutes talking about this because it's Friday and this is hilarious. So, Colin, first, why is this old clip making the rounds? And tell us just how much the internet is loving it.
Yeah, so it's really unclear who threw the first rock, whether it was Twitter or TikTok. But a viral clip of Elmo started circulating recently, and that one was actually from a 2020 episode. Because of that clip, which people love so much, they started digging up old clips of Elmo, including this one from the 2004 episode. And Rocco has been driving Elmo crazy since 1999, so I think it was just a matter of time until their feud spilled over into the mainstream.
All right, and Callan, a major update to this breaking story. Elmo himself has responded. What's he saying? What do we know about his current relationship with Rocco the Pet Rock? Have they reconciled?
Yeah, so Elmo said that he and Zoe learned to share. They are good friends. Everything's cool with them. Don't ask him about Rocco. He is not ready to talk about it.
Can't handle this story. It is so funny to be him screaming at the end. How is he going to eat the cookie? It's just too good. All right, now, Colin, also, people probably know that Elmo's no stranger to memes. You've probably seen them on social media. There's this one that everybody, I think, has probably seen at this point where his arms are outstretched in front of these roaring flames. What is with the internet's Elmo obsession?
Yeah, I mean, listen, everyone knows Elmo. Almost everyone grew up with Elmo. We're all Elmo fans. I think Elmo fits really well into a bunch of different memes that sort of express how we're feeling in any given moment. So, you know, he's really versatile. He's really recognizable, and he's a fantastic meme, especially because we think of him as lovable, cuddly, cute, not savage or unhinged. And right now, Elmo is a little unhinged. That's where this is all coming from, and that's why he's a fantastic meme.
You know what? If at home you're like, what is going on right now? I think this falls into the category of good to know also because it is true that everybody's talking about it. So you're welcome. Now you can be part of the conversation, and it's hilarious. All right, Callan, thank you so much. Great to see you. And that does it for this hour of Morning News Now, but the news continues right now.
Thanks for watching our YouTube channel. Follow today's top stories and breaking news by downloading the NBC News app.